Joining us, everyone. This is going to be a great session on Hyper-V Healthcheck. My name's Peter Meister. I'm a group product manager in the Windows Server division. I'm responsible for private cloud infrastructure as a service as a technical product manager.
And my name is Mark S.I. I'm a premier field engineer. I'm assuming most you guys worked with PFEs before. So I'm one of those guys. I'm in the field working with you as premier customers, and my main area is virtualization and server performance. So today we're going to talk about Hyper-V Healthcheck. So if you're deploying your Hyper-V servers, what are the items you have to be careful about? Deployment, and then monitoring and look at best practices, and then optimize your Hyper-V environment for the best of all. So. Without any further ado, we're going to go ahead and start.
Mark, I got a quick question.
Sure.
How many of you know what a PFE is? Okay. How many of you don't? Okay. Do you explain what a PFE is?
So, if you have a premier contract with Microsoft Services, as part of your premier contract, you can actually work with our field engineers. I'm one of those. So we have a wide range of different skill sets. If you've ever done any risk assessment, like RAPs, AD RAPs, SQL RAPs, any other RAPs, or health check, or any workshops, or even reactive issues, or proactive and reactive issues on your side, that's when you talk to your technical account manager, and they will engage us, and we will help you. So technically, we are your advocate, in front of these guys at our product group. So we will work with you to make sure everything is fine. And if there's anything that we need to take back to our product group and get help, that's what we do.
They're a great resource for you to leverage in your accounts. So if you've got the opportunity to access guys like Mark, because they're the best that we have in the field, you really should take advantage of it. So thanks a lot for explaining that.
Sure, anytime. So we have a lot of slides in here today. I'm expecting that maybe we can't cover everything, but one of the things is I'm expecting everyone, if you're interested in doing any Hyper-V, download the slides from TechEd and then use it, because that's a good start. We're looking at Hyper-V performance, Hyper-V best practices, and you can just follow the flow and get it. So if you don't cover everything, I don't promise that we cover everything. Still out there, I've included everything, so you can go back and use it at your own leisure. So let's go ahead and start with this. So the objective of this session is we're going to look at the tools that are available out there for you to do your own health check, right? All free tools. You can go ahead and do it. PowerShell, everything else that is available on Server 2008 R2 and outside Server 2008 R2. So you can actually do your own health check. And then one of the other things that we want to look is in a highly available environment with HAVMs, how do we do health check and take it to the next level? And then the other item is we do have an offering. Again, if you need our help from the Premier side, we do have an offering like any other health check or risk assessment. We have a health check for Hyper-V, so you can talk to your technical account manager and ask for it if you need more, and if you need knowledge transfer, even on top of that. So I'm going to mention about what items are being covered in that health check also.
And also, make sure you save some time for Q&A. And if you have questions that go beyond the session, we'll try to stay a little bit outside so that we can answer them.
OK. So the first thing is Hyper-V best practice analyzers. So how many of you guys seen best practice analyzers in general on Server 2000 R2? So isn't it great? So we used to have like best practice analyzers separate from for different products. Like example that's been out there for a long time was Exchange BPA, right? So Exchange BPA, if you wanted to deploy Exchange, or you already had the Exchange deployed, you would run the tool. It catches some of the known issues that people catches people based on like misconfigurations or changing the settings on the system after a while. It catches that and reports it back. Now with R2, the Server 2008 R2, we have that within the product. So that's great. We have it for different roles. So what we have in here is you can actually go back and look at TechNet. So within TechNet, we have all these different roles. It says best practice analyzer, right? So all these different roles on R2, they have their own best practice analyzer. And as soon as if you don't have any of those and you don't see it, that means you don't have an update that would enable that feature that would enable it, and you don't have the update. So you have to go back and install the update. Example is the Hyper-V, right? You might install your R2 server, and you don't see best practice analyzer for Hyper-V. So what you need to do is just, you need to install the update for Hyper-V, and that would show up, right? So these are all the different roles, and if there's anything that's being added later on, because these are all being added by Windows Update, they will show up in here. So you can keep track of what roles and feature within Server 2000 R2, they have their own BPA. So how do we see it? So if you want to see BPA, the first place that you do all your management on Server 2000 R2 is Server Manager, right? So within the Server Manager console, you're going to go ahead and go to drill down to that role. In this case, that's going to be Hyper-V role, right? And again, if you're an admin and you're doing troubleshooting, best place to start troubleshooting on Server 2000 R2 is Server Manager, right? Because you have like, oh, look at this. We have a bunch of errors in here. So this is first place you look. It aggregates all the event channels that are related to Hyper-V, and it brings you a view of all those events right here. So without looking at the event log, you can see what's going on directly, right? So that's the first place to do health check. Look at this place and see if there's any errors are showing up, right? And then you can just open up those errors and see why that problem is happening, okay? So now, the next one is, again, for best practices and troubleshooting, we are aggregating, we are filtering all these services that are related to Hyper-V. So you don't have to go ahead and open up Service Control Manager and look at all those services and figure out which one belongs to Hyper-V. They're all listed in here. So if I'm having issues with Hyper-V, I would go look at this and see, oh, these are all set to start up auto, and they're all running. If there was one that wasn't running, maybe that's a problem. Let's go ahead and start and see if that problem's gone, right? So that's, again, a great place to start. Now, after you add your Hyper-V best practices role or feature and you install the update, this item will show up within your Server Manager, right? So that's what you see within the Server Manager. And what you need to do is you just click on scan this role, right? So you scan the role, and then it's just a PowerShell. Behind this is a PowerShell script that runs and compares all the data that's being captured against an XML rule file. There's a rule file that has all the rules, right? And these can be updated by Microsoft. If there's anything new that is being showed up or we find out something else is a best practice, the next Windows update will deliver that XML file, just a simple XML file, right? So now when you run this and it's done, you can see a bunch of warnings, if there's any errors that will show up, and if there's any, like these are all the items that are compliant. If there's no non-compliant items, they'll show up right here. So you can simply look at these. So like this warning says, you'd better run your Hyper-V server on a server core for performance reasons and all the other items that we have server core for, right? So this is just the informational. So if you know about this, you can just right-click on that and say exclude, because we know we're running on Enterprise Full Edition, no server core. So let's go ahead and exclude it. That won't show up again. Or if you didn't have ECC RAM, that will show up. If you're actually, let's see if you have you have a virtual machine that uses dynamic VHD. So that shows up, it says dynamic VHD was detected. So you can go back and find out, do you need dynamic VHD or you want to go fixed size VHD, right? Both supported, but based on the scenario and your production environment, you might just need a fixed size VHD compared to dynamic size VHD, right? Or as part of our best practices, we always say, there's a new feature that we have for virtual machines on R2 is SCSI controller, right? Virtual SCSI controller within the VM on VMs that are Hyper-V, you can actually add storage, do a hot add remove storage to your VM without taking your VM down, right? But that requires having a blank or empty SCSI controller on your VM. So this tells us these 3 VMs up here, they don't have one of those. So as part of best practices, you might want to add it, because later on, if you need to go ahead and add more storage to your VM, you can do it without turning off your VM. That's a great feature, right? But you need to have this. So best practice analyzer will tell you. If you are running an older version of integration services within your VM, or you don't have an integration services. Again, this will be reporting that item, and not sure if we have, we don't have any VMs. Yeah, this one. There you go. We have a VM. Thank you. So we have a virtual machine, and the name is showing up right there. That is not current. That has an older version of integration services. So hopefully everyone knows that running latest integration services and running integration services would help with your performance, right? So it helps with the VM performance. You get the best performance out of your virtual machines, and you get to use all the features of your VMs. Like if we look at the settings, these are the extra features that are being enabled by integration services. So shutting down your operating system VM without logging onto the VM, or using PowerShell, time synchronization between your parent and child, data exchange, heartbeat, and backing up your VM, do a live backup of the VM from the parent while the VM is running. If you don't have integration services, these items that are going over VM bus, they won't work. So you definitely want to have integration services installed. Great performance boost, and you see this, these features will be also utilized using that. So
I got a question.
Sure.
What about Linux OSs? Will I see that same insight?
Yeah, they all work with the latest integration services that Linux has. And if you guys saw the announcement today, we also support CentOS with Hyper-V. So CentOS is supported with Hyper-V. Basically, it's a free Red Hat. And a lot of admins, they love it because it's a free Red Hat, right? And we announced this, that today. So that was added to the supported operating systems within Hyper-V operating system. Okay, so.
I have a question.
Sure.
How many of you are running Linux on Hyper-V? SUSE,
Nice.
How many of you are running SUSE? How many are running Red Hat? How many are excited about CentOS? Great, thank you.
Nice.
That's awesome.
Okay. So that's the first place that you run your Hyper-V best practice on BPA, right? So what if you have multiple cluster nodes, and you have HAVMs running on those, and you want to get a report from all of them? You don't want to go run this on each node individually. Or what if you have Server Core or Hyper-V 2008, the free version of Hyper-V that is Hyper-V Server R2, Hyper-V Server 2008 R2? That's a free version of Hyper-V, right? What if you have that, and it's like Server Core, so there's no UI? You don't have this. You have two options. First of all, for Server Core, you can use remote Server Manager, right? Within Server Manager, you can say, connect to another computer, right? And then connect remotely to your remote machine. And as long as you have the BPA bits and the update installed on the remote machine, you can do the same thing in here, run it, and look at the best practice analyzer, okay? The second option would be just use PowerShell. All these best practice analyzers, not only Hyper-V, everything else, they all have best practice analyzer PowerShell module. So this is a very, very simple example of one of the things that we have in here is a 8-node cluster. This is an 8-node cluster, okay, highly available VMs. So we have 55, I have 55 VMs, so this is one of the labs that I'm using. And we want to go ahead and run BPA against it, right? So instead of logging on or connecting to each of these machines separately, we're going to go ahead and just use PowerShell. So the first thing we do within this PowerShell script is we're just importing failover cluster. Why we're doing import failover cluster module is because we're just trying to enumerate all the nodes within the cluster. I don't need to know how many nodes you have in your cluster. Just running this against the cluster, it tells me how many nodes we have, right? So we get all the node names. So the second line is only the output file, so we want to put it in a CSV format. Now, in here, we just get the cluster name. So you give me the cluster name, I'll tell you how many nodes you have, and then the output is going to be the best practice analyzer results, right? So that's the cluster name. This other line in here, what it does, it just gets cluster nodes. So we say, go to this cluster, get all the nodes, and then how many of you guys use PowerShell 2.0 remoting capabilities? Only like 4 or 5? It's great. It's a great feature. You know, remoting capabilities will let you remote into any other machine that has PowerShell 2.0 and run jobs simultaneously. So you can run one script on multiple different machines remotely at the same time and then get the data on your admin machine or Windows 7 or whatever machine, that even XP with PowerShell 2.0. So what we do in here, we just get all the nodes, and after the pipeline, we pipe that output as an object to creating new PSS session, right? And then that session would be our variable S. Okay, so now, the next item is right here, and that is just invoking the command on all those remote sessions. So we already have 8 sessions, right, because we had 8 nodes. We have 8 remote sessions. Within the script block, we do 3 simple things. We are importing the best practices module, PowerShell module, right? Simple, just import module. We are invoking that best practice analyzer BPA model, and our BPA model is the Hyper-V, right? One of the things that you see is I have it out now because I don't want to see what happens when it's running. You know, I'm interested in the result, right? So we're invoking that. So that is forcing the Hyper-V BPA to run, and then the next item would be getting the result. So we are just asking for the result. All the items down here after this select statement are just to make it pretty. You don't have to do it, right? But I'm just selecting a few items and putting that within a CSV file using the export CSV commandlet within PowerShell. So again, very easy. Well, you should be able, if you don't know a lot of PowerShell, you should be able to do it yourself because nothing complicated in here, right? And there's no really crazy programming knowledge required for PowerShell. You don't have to have a lot of logic in here. It's just like very simple and straightforward, right? And by the way, I'm not a programming guy either, right? So I'm an admin. I've always been an admin. So I'm on the same boat if you're an admin. So the last part is just removing that session. So we're just tearing down the remote session and writing to the screen that, hey, you know, I'm done. Simple, right? And you don't have to do that either. So, and this machine I'm running the PowerShell script on doesn't have a cluster. It's not part of the cluster. This is all being done remotely. So imagine you're sitting on your Windows 7 box and doing all this remotely against your cluster, right? So just run it, cluster name, and
how many of you actually do this today? How many of you actually run these types of pre-reports to know this stuff?
Excellent.
Not many.
Yeah, again, you know, this automation will make your life much easier. Instead of doing a lot of manual work, you can just use PowerShell, and it's very powerful, you know. And if you want to take it to the next level, put some .NET in it, and then you will see how powerful it is, right? You can use your old VB scripts and WMI, right? So WMI could be used within PowerShell. You could use .NET and the existing PowerShell commandlets. A lot of third-party vendors, like example is EMC, they have PowerShell commandlets for managing the SAN side. So they have those. So the only thing you have to do is whoever has their own PowerShell commandlets, you just import their module and start using it, right? So you already saw in here. So this is like a PowerShell with no modules loaded. So example is if I say get cluster, there's no get cluster. So, and tab completion is savior in here. So I'm just importing failover cluster. Now, get cluster works, right? Because I'm just importing all those commandlets. So you can do that with any other third-party, Active Directory, remote desktop services, Citrix, EMC, everyone that has their own command list, you just import it in and start using. And they are very user-friendly, easy to use as far as the actual name of those. If I want to see what's available on cluster, I do star, cluster star, and get help. That's your friend, right? So everything related to cluster is here. This is like one of the things that I've used for self-learning, right? So you could do the same thing. So if you want to start self-learning, use the get help and few other command lists within PowerShell, and you should be able to do a lot of like basic to mid-level administrative job without even having a knowledge of PowerShell or like hardcore scripting.
Yeah, some of the benefits, some things you can do with PowerShell that are really cool. If you're into building your own like management response web portals and then invoking these scripts through a front end, right, where you would maybe want to give the ability for other people to do this reporting or get this knowledge, you have such an ability to wrap into IIS and utilize this with .NET that you can create your own little management portals where you can throw out workflow and macros, if you will, and get this insight. As well, as Mark articulated, when you build these, you get to repurpose them. So they become like a part of your ammo tube belt. You take them everywhere you go when you're working in your environment, and it really starts to simplify your life. Makes it faster for you also versus the GUI. It's much quicker to get the information this way than it is actually clicking through the GUI. So you can be quicker to market in getting that insight.
Right. So here's the CSV file we got from our report. We just ran the script, and this is what it came back with. Right. So now you can see it's really easy to do. You all know how to do filtering and everything else in Excel, or all the nodes are listed in here. So we captured everything from all the nodes, and depends on what you're looking for. You can certainly look at warnings, errors, informational, everything else, and this is like a simple output file, right? If you're interested in pretty files, well, I do have actually a link to one of my coworkers' blog that uses the same type of work, but the only thing he does is at the end, instead of export CSV, he does export HTML, and then he uses a CSS style sheet and then creates a HTML format. Yeah. So it depends on what you're interested in. You could use that, and same thing, the same output, but depends on the job, that you're trying to accomplish. So that's Hyper-V Best Practice Analyzer. So going back to our slide deck. So these are the items like we talked about integration components, number of logical processors. So far in R2 SB1, 64 logical processors are supported. So Hyper-V BPA will check that. So if you're running outside that, it will report that your number of logical processors are outside the support statement, right, or the support boundaries. We will look at the number of virtual processors per VM. So if you've used Hyper-V or you know about VMs, we do support up to 4 virtual processors for anything over 2008 and Windows Vista, right? So, or Windows 7. So Windows 7, Windows Server 2008, 2008 R2, and all the Linux distributions, they all have the support for up to 4 virtual processors within the VM. Server 2003 VM only supports 2, right? So if you go back and attach 4 virtual processors to your VM, obviously it's outside the support statement, so it's unsupported. But this BPA will report that. So if somebody makes a mistake and create a template with that, BPA will report it, so you can go back and fix that. VHD type, we talked about VHD type detection. So if you want to get the fastest performance out of your VHD and virtual disks, make sure you use a fixed size. Again, dynamic expanding is supported, but if you want to get like the fastest and you're not concerned about storage, just go with the fixed size. And this will tell you if you're running dynamic or fixed and everything else. Legacy network adapters, unless you're doing like Citrix VDI provisioning or any other, any other boot from Pixie boot or doing a Pixie boot or anything else that it does require during the boot process, does require network activities. You use legacy network adapter. Otherwise, try not to use that because it does have negative performance impact on the whole environment. Okay? So that's the legacy network adapter. Try to use the synthetic adapter that has the best performance. And then many more. So if you're interested in see what other items are being cached or reported within BPA, either look at that, look at the TechNet article we talked about, or just run it and see what items are being reported. Look at the compliant and non-compliant, and you'll see all of them. So the HTML output I was talking about is right here, Server Manager, we already talked about. And then if there are warnings that can be ignored, make sure to just exclude those so they won't show up again. And we already talked about, you already have the script that I did the demo on. So this is the script. I do have a blog on this one too, so if you're interested, you want to do it yourself, feel free to take the script, massage it, whatever you want to do with the script, just use it at your own risk.
Massage it.
Yeah, it's just like they want to do some other fancy things.
So I have a question. You know, we're going through a lot of stuff, so you know, I like to take breaks in between to take questions. I know we have a Q&A at the end, but are there any questions on what we've covered so far? Because we're moving fast. No questions? Awesome.
Okay. Map.
Yes, map. So how many of you are using Microsoft assessment toolkits to analyze your environments, to troubleshoot, to help resolve? So obviously, the map toolkit, we're currently at version 5.5. And what this is, it's an assessment toolkit. It goes in, it deals with things like inventorying of your network, assessing and analyzing your network, looks at all your systems. It also does things like reporting. And as we're moving towards a private cloud and a public cloud modeling, we're starting to move this product up the stack to start to look at and analyze those types of vehicles, like private cloud, like public cloud solutions, or public-private cloud solutions. So when you start seeing the next generation of map come out after 5.5, you're going to start to look to see the clouds inclusive in that assessment. So that's a great thing. One of the things that we use it for is obviously to help our customers who are looking at doing consolidation projects or looking at moving more into the rational dynamic model with Microsoft solutions. If you're not familiar with infrastructure optimization models, I won't bore you with a marketing vehicle, but what that marketing vehicle translates to in an engineering vehicle is where are you in standardizing on the IT use in a heterogeneous environment? Are you standard? You're not using a DIR service? Are you basic? You're kind of getting, or excuse me, are you basic, not using a DIR service? Are you standard? You're starting to use directory services? Are you rational? Are you starting to interconnect DIR services across different heterogeneuses for single sign-on? Or are you dynamic where you're absolutely going between private, public, premise-based solutions across heterogeneous and being able to interact seamlessly between all of those solutions? So we have a model for our customers that walks them through that life cycle of owning our product and how our products link to other products, including products outside of our frame. And so MAP helps us look and analyze that stuff. Like if we've got a problem with a directory sync with a Sunbox, right? If we have Linux machines that are out there rogue, or if we've got Windows machines that are out there rogue, you can use this yourself as just a knowledge tool to know what's going on in that entire thing you have in your system environment. How many of you are using it today for those purposes? One person, two people. I highly recommend you check this out. It's a secret tool. Not a lot of people know about it, and those that do know about it don't really apply it in their environments. You should try it out. It's very, very valuable. Now, oops. Okay.
Sure.
There we go. So that's the MAP toolkit. Now, security in a virtualization environment is paramount. As you're moving to a trustworthy computing model, virtualization becomes really a problematic situation for really looking in deep and finding out what's going on with VMs. You have to add a lot more layers of defense and depth. So secure, and this is my area of expertise. So taking virtualization serious means doing the same things you did in the physical world in the virtual world, right? Harden your server environments, patch, put AV in place, isolate network traffic, turn on virtual network firewalls, right? Use virtual intrusion detection, right? Focus on hardening your templates. Where you can run server core, invoke server core. Don't run full instance of Windows if the role doesn't require it. Why? Because you're reducing 70% of the patch footprint, right? So as you start to take these steps in a virtual realm, you can really start to make that headache a lot less. Everyone calls it virtual sprawl. How many of you agree with that in a lot of cases, right? We went down the path of virtualization, but we were so gung-ho to just get to it that we forgot a lot of our habits along the way. I want to focus on those. Invoke BitLocker, encrypt your VMs. When you take your VMs offline and you want to store them and they've got things like P2 information or databases with customer data, you know, let's not have a PlayStation Network Amazon problem. No disrespect to either, but we've seen it in the press recently. Encrypt your VHD files. Make it difficult for someone to go and crack out all your customer data, right? These are things that are easily avoidable. A lot of the press we see in the cloud is bad IT management. It has nothing to do with Amazon and PlayStation. It's stupid decisions by people like us who just aren't prescribing a really good plan of attack against security. Now, on the specific delegated rights, you want to do things like no VM admins for the parent, right? Keep your OU admins out of your parents, right? Don't let them touch the Hyper-V hosts, right? Segregate that to your security if you've got security teams, if you've got change compliancy teams that handle that for things like idle, right? Don't let those OU guys anywhere near your templates. Don't even let them modify a template, right? Secure your templates like you secure your base images when you're assist prepping, or if you're doing WDS or ghosting or whatever your flavor of multicast imaging is there today. Make sure you're applying that same capability into your VM world, right? On the self-service portal, and you'll see this in a lot of our sessions this week, delegation of rights of what those app owners. So let's talk for a second about a private cloud scenario. I've got an on-premise private cloud. I have an HR application owner. That guy may not know jack diddly squat about security. Am I really going to want to give him anything more than read-only rights in his portal? Probably not. Am I going to want him to modify current production solutions in place through his self-service portal? Probably not. So it's not just hardening bits, it's also process. You have to provide the same processes and habits that we use in our directorate services, right? That's why we have OUs. That's why we have these delegated admin rights below those layers of root. Apply them, right? Linux does this, Unix does this, Windows does it. Throw that down. Now, we do have a lot of best practices. We've been doing trustworthy computing for 10 years. So we have a lot of guidance. We have an Active Directory hardening guide built in cooperation with the National Security Agency. So we've gone and we've worked with the top people worried about security to make sure our components are not only qualified to work in those high-end environments like a DoD environment, but also are just as qualified to work in healthcare, mobile, verticals like hosting environments, manufacturing. All those areas have different compliancy and regulatory rules, including security templates. If you work in some of those verticals, you already know what I mean. Know that we have guidance for each of those verticals, coupled to virtualization, to make sure you're successful in your genre. So if you're in healthcare, how many of you are in healthcare? How many of you are defense? How many of you are retail manufacturing? So we have guidance to help you at your own individual layer, catered to you. Hosting, just to throw it out there. 1, 2. So how many of you have looked at the Hyper-V security guide or read the book? You know, the Hyper-V security book. How many of you looked at e-books or things to drop down on your mobile devices? Those are all things that you can get through these links. You should definitely go and check it out. We have a lot of security guidance. And why I emphasize it a lot as part of this session is because you're going to make really quick steps to go farther and faster with virtualization. Everyone in here is probably heavily using it. And I'll ask the question, how many of you are 50% virtualized?
Wow.
Whoa. How many of you are 80% virtualized? Yeah, I mean, this is ludicrous.
So here's a question. Anyone here is from IT Sec?
Oh, yeah. Get that groove
Anyone?
on, buddy.
Only one? So you guys don't send your IT techs in here?
How many of you have separate security teams that handle your physical and virtual and cloud frames as far as security templating? 1, 2?
Well, he knows that ITsec really cares about, like, when you're adding one extra layer as virtualization layer, hypervisor, then you got to be careful about the security, right? Because, like, if your parent is compromised, that means all your VMs are compromised.
That's absolutely right.
Right? So that one extra layer is a huge layer. That's why we want to make sure your management partition, your parent partition, it is fully hardened and secure.
Now, in closing on the security side, one thing to understand is that we can help guide you. We have a lot of DIY prescriptive guidance up on Microsoft.com. So if you don't have sites to go to find this stuff, you can go to Microsoft.com, whack private cloud. We walk you through this. We also have a lot of hardening guidance that comes from the physical world that you can instantly apply in your virtual world for similar workloads. So you're not necessarily having to create a new wheel. But one other thing to understand is, if you look at the bulk of virtualization penetrations where hackers or evil types have gotten in and have exposed, what you're going to find is that it always comes back to simple things like I didn't even invoke a firewall, or I didn't put an intrusion detection on, or I left all my ports open because I didn't server role configure my workload. Now, you may go, oh, that's funny, he's just saying that. We've done audits, and that's a lot of you sitting in this room. How many of you have hardened your virtual machines? And be honest. Look at that. How many of you are going to leave and harden them? Very important. And in closing, understand that the bulk of the exposures that you've seen in the press have to do with simple things like this. Very, very simple. It only takes one VM, and I'll get to you for sure. It only takes one VM to be exposed up at Amazon's EC2 cloud, and I'm a fan of it. It's a great cloud, and I'm not here to bash on it because I use it, and that's part of my job, to know our partners and our competitors. However, if you're up there with a bunch of images that are exposing every part of your ports, and you throw that thing up on the common internet with a public IP, well, you get what you deserve. So very important that you start to really take this serious, because you're going to go to the cloud, whether it's public or private, and the habits you learn in virtualization are going to be the ones you take to the cloud, and it's going to get more and more difficult to maintain security in a cloud environment, okay? Because you're mixing and matching physical, virtual, and also non-operating system-based solutions in place, including mobile. So with that, I'll hand it back to Mark.
Question?
Oh, yeah, one question.
BitLocker doesn't have any impact.
None.
If anyone here uses BitLocker, do you guys have any performance issues? That's a no.
No.
Okay.
No. The key to BitLocker is we go through the process, and just to clarify for everyone, BitLocker runs right away and starts the process of encrypting that drive. So rather than causing the pain of taking a non-encrypted store and then encrypting it, which takes cycles and threading, which in effect, for instance, in fairness to your statement, your question, if I ran BitLocker and then wanted to be an information worker on that same VM for the first hour, would there be degradation? Yes, there would be, because it's BitLocker encrypting a live drive with lots of data on it. Once it's finished encrypting the base volume, every new file brought on, it's headless. You don't see it, you don't feel it, which is what you're talking about as well. So it's phenomenal stuff, and let me tell you how many of our employees have lost a laptop and been thankful to their stars because they had that turned on. Right? Yeah,
so it's just protects you against physical loss of your storage, right? So if somebody is actually, like, we're using VHDs, right? If somebody just goes out and grabs one hard disk and goes out and tries to extract the VHDs, because you can mount the VHD and get all the data off the VHD. If you had it bitlocked, no luck. They can't do it. Well, there are extra levels if you want to go more. There are EFS and some other third-party encryption tools that you can actually go more, but those sometimes they have some, like, a little bit slight performance impact. But BitLocker, no, it doesn't.
Yeah, and another thing to know is that you can actually layer your encryption, and I know a lot of you probably already know that. So if it's really an important VM, and you're running some really important data on there that you absolutely don't want anyone to have, then you can obviously invoke BitLocker because it's built in, but then you can go and use other third-party tools like Mark's talking about to put yet another layer on that volume and double that security very easily. Yes?
Everything that you've talked about here about the best practices, the tool, the map toolkit, and that, you're talking about managing this from a host-by-host basis. Is there any kind of integration with Virtual Machine Manager or another system center product?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. So the question was, we're talking about a lot of stuff about map tool, obviously about baseline security analyzers, BPAs, and it sounds like it's a host-by-host basis. How do you take that to the next level and make it centralized and automated for an entire environment? And it's a perfect segue into this right here. But before I even get to the baseline security analyzer, how do you really apply these manual processes of these tools to a large farm of systems? And the way that Mark was showing earlier is by building these scripts that automate the process of going out and analyzing all these systems, taking that, throwing it into a report, or what I do, and he showed you the CSV aspects. I take that CSV after exportation, I move it into a database, and I maintain that archive forever. Forever meaning, for me, 6 years, right, for a traditional enterprise environment. So I will go the step further and import that, and that way I have a logical set of data based on my systems. I do that as a security guy because when a vulnerability comes, I need to go through all audit trails to find the source, right? So use PowerShell to start to look at your entire environment, understanding that all of these baseline security and baseline protocol analyzers and baseline tools that we provide all invoke PowerShell under the hood. Yeah. And as Mark showed in his demo earlier, he went and he tasked an entire cluster in one little script that, quite frankly, all of us could learn in 10 minutes. And that's one thing why, and I'm not a PowerShell expert either, but let me tell you, every one of you should really become very, very good at the basics of it. I look at it almost as DOS. It's almost a no-brainer for me as an IT pro, and I don't like developers. I'm an IT guy, okay? I'm an infrastructure guy, so I'll just say that. I'm an IT infrastructure guy.
I was reading an article the other day, and that was talking about, as a Windows admin, we used to have like going after MCSEs and getting certificates and all that, but now like new qualifications are coming up, right? If you're going for a new job, if I'm going for a new job, the question is going to be, do you know PowerShell? Because like if you know PowerShell, you can manage, oh, you're talking SCVMM. SCVMM is all on PowerShell. So everything you do in SCVMM UI, wizards, and everything else is a PowerShell commanded. Yeah. So you can just script your whole environment, cluster, Server 2008 R2 cluster, Active Directory. You know, it was really painful using ADSI, right? So you had to use ADSI scripting to do Active Directory management. If you've ever done Active Directory management, anyone here is the AD admin? So I'm 100% sure you've done ADSI scripting before, right? Have you seen the R2 Active Directory module commanded? Difference, you've seen the difference. @-user. You don't have to have the long DN and everything else, you know. @-user, @-domain. It's just like all those easy things, right? They're easy, but you have to learn it at some point, right?
Yeah.
So again, with PowerShell, talking about SCVMM, my assumption here is you don't have SCVMM. But if you have SCVMM, you can go to the next level, because within SCVMM, it's really easy to just like, if you say get-VM, it tells you all your VMs. It gives you all the VMs running on all the hosts within your environment. Easy, right? Just get-VM. You don't even have to go and aggregate different cluster nodes. SCVMM understands clustering behind the scenes. So it does all those. So you can get VM properties, you can get anything you want, host properties, they all can be queried using PowerShell within SCVMM. I love using SCVMM because of that fact. So I don't have to do anything with cluster, anything else. SCVMM does it all for you, right?
Yeah, I mean, you know, the benefit of System Center, the suite itself, you know, beyond just one specific part of it, is that it's going to start to bring a lot of what we've had from the PowerShell commandlet side directly into a management conduit. What that's going to do, and I think the gentleman in the back brings up a point, which is, I don't want to do these sneaker netting things anymore, right? I'm sick and tired of the sneaker netting, whether I'm running around doing manual tasking, whether I'm running around doing virtual machine tasking. I want to start centralizing under one management tool across the physical, across the virtual, across the clouds, and be able to orchestrate my world from one place. Now that System Center is bringing all of that logic, and let's be clear, other competitors have it in too. How many of you are VMware? I mean, and don't be shy, I'm not going to, yeah. There's a lot of VMware, and guess what? They use a lot of PowerShell.
Yeah, they have PowerShell commandlets, yeah.
They love our PowerShell. So, as an industry standard in our roles, especially with the cloud coming, it's going to be more and more important for our roles to become fluent almost in how to utilize these scripting tools.
Anyone here is doing public cloud, Office 365 or BPOS? So Office 365, there are a few things that you have to do within PowerShell, right? You want to do ADFS, you want to do federation, you have to do in PowerShell. So again, even in the cloud, if you're moving to the cloud, you gotta need that PowerShell skills.
Now I'll quickly close because I want Mark to finish up, which is on the security side, we have a tool that's been in place since 2003, since Windows Server 2003 launched, and this is a tool that I had a hand in. The Microsoft Baseline Security Analyzer goes off, scans an entire network or a segment or whatever you want to point at, an individual host, client or server. In this case, we'll talk server. You're able to go out, scan it, find out its vulnerability assessment, find out its patch levels, find out whether it has AV, find out whether it's secure, and then it gives you a report, tells you how to assess a plan of action against what it's come and seen, whether it's a single system or an entire pharma system. It's a free tool. It should be used a lot by you all to make sure that you're keeping those systems, both physical and virtual, up to snuff. It also provides, just like Mark has been showing with the BPAs, best practices, because it can look at workloads. It can look at core versus full. It can look at Exchange. It can look at SQL. And it has the knowledge and the intellectual capital built into the tool to go off and give you that intelligence. It'll even point to knowledge bases up at TechNet to provide you patch and recovery, or patch and fix if it's required. So it's going to give you a lot more insight, and it's also coupled to our logging system, which is very important for you to understand. Big change in logging occurred between the 2003 wave of products and 2008. So if you are on 2008, and I'll ask the question, how many of you are Server 08 based? Awesome. Then you're taking advantage of a very intelligent logging environment that's able to bring in that additional insight, something that our prior servers have not had. So when you wrap this all together, it's going to give you the best of breed insight and analysis within your private, public, and premise-based systems.
So getting to that point, like getting to you asking about System Center Virtual Machine Manager, SCVMM, like example in here. SCVMM has this feature that can go within the VM and gets the virtual machine name, like their server name, whatever you have within the VM for your server name. SCVMM has that feature. So if you need to go ahead and scan all the VMs for their patch level, use PowerShell in here, get -VM, get the name, right? And then after you get the name, so basically, as soon as you get the name for that VM, you can pass it to MBSA within your PowerShell script and go ahead and run MBSA from the command line against all those VMs and the host machines too. So you can do that.
Wrong PowerShell command.
Yep.
But we're running on live gear. This no smoke and mirrors. This is an actual production private cloud up in Redmond. So we're not here to show you anything but the real deal. And this, by the way, is System Center current, I believe.
Yes, it's
so this is not DNext.
R2.
And that's one thing, while he's getting this up and running, we have a private cloud architecture already seeded and deployed. You don't have to wait for when System Center releases to start this direction. One recommendation is you go and look at what we've been able to do with current. So if you've got System Center Virtual Machine Manager, if you've got the old System Center, what I believe is the current System Center, and you've got Windows servers with Hyper-V, you've got the building blocks for a private cloud built into your environment already. You shouldn't have to go and spend new money if you've got 90% of it existing in your enterprise. Go and check out the private clouds, WAC private cloud on Microsoft.com, because we can walk you through enabling that current solution you have into a cloud. We do have some here this week. The challenge, obviously, as you can imagine, with a cloud virtual lab is providing a cloud to every attendee in the virtual lab.
So this is the item from PowerShell I was talking about. SCVMM gets the name on the machine within the server itself. So it doesn't matter what you have as a VM name, as a display name. It goes out and queries whatever you have named your server. So that's the one that you can ping, and then you can actually go ahead and get the MBSA report. So you can get this and then pass it to MBSA. Do that.
Can I make a shameless plug?
Sure.
So shameless plug, because it goes back to the question that was just asked about hands-on labs. We do have a tool up in Microsoft that I'm happy to provide to anyone willing to send me an email, so get your pen out. It's called the Private Cloud in a Box Training Environment. It's a fully virtualized, minus you need 2 boxes to dedicate to Hyper-V node A and B, and you have to have a SAN with at least 250 gigs of LUN available to create the cluster, right? It's 100% virtualized from there. It'll build up an entire private cloud architecture that you can train your people, train yourself, get up to speed on what our cloud looks like.
What was the?
It's a 180-day eval. It's Peter MEI at Microsoft.com. Yes, I will send it to you, but you need to do the following. And I've done this already because I came out of MMS and I did over 100 drives. You have to be willing to commit to trust me to send me a USB drive with over 55 gigs available. I will turn that around with my team in 24 hours, ship it right back to you. You get 180 days to play with this thing. You can train up on it before you commit. And again, this will also be usable for you when you start playing with System Center, because you can upgrade those current VMs using the beta bits and go up to the new private cloud that you're seeing us talk about this week. But this is the current cloud to start that momentum, that journey, if you will, for you to get there. And I'm happy to provide it. I have it here with me. Maybe I'll do an hour on Wednesday of this week if you want to come and just do USB drive burns with me. But we're very eager to make sure you have the training and knowledge to do this right. So let me know. Peter MEI at Microsoft.com.
It's on the board.
Send me an email and I will hook you up.
OK, so question.
You can send me it across the UK, my friend. I get them all the time, all over the world. Yeah. I can actually dump it to Reading with a guy to give it to you local. The question was, can I ship this thing anywhere in the world? And the answer is, yeah. Anywhere Microsoft is, which is everywhere in the world, I can ship it. So I can help you no matter where you live.
Well, do you have it on a share on CorpNet?
I do have it on a share at Microsoft CorpNet.
Talk
for
to your
those at
technical
Microsoft.
account manager. You're a premier customer, right? Talk to your TAM and have him ping him, because they can actually, from CorpNet, they can pull it down and give it to you in UK. That would be faster and easier.
Yeah.
So, OK. Yeah. All right. How many of you guys worked with Server 2003 cluster? OK. How about Server 2008 cluster, Server 2008 R2 cluster?
Fabulous. Oh, gosh, yes.
Don't you love it? This is like, I used to work with 2003 cluster, and now with 2008, life is much, much easier. It's more resilient. It stays up. It's just like, it doesn't go down. It's just like trying to kill it. Nope, it doesn't go down. So now with Hyper-V, we have integration with Failover Cluster 2008 R2 that provide us live migration, highly available VMs, cluster share volumes. How many of you guys use cluster share volumes on Hyper-V? Wow, look at that. Awesome. So with cluster share volumes, you don't need to worry about like, hey, this disk is failing over between different nodes. Storage stays the same. Everyone's using the same storage, right? Obviously, you got to be careful about how to use that, because you have a blended I/O going down to the path, right, to the fiber channel or ISCSI that you're using. All the VMs are hitting the same disk, so you have to be careful about that. But other than that, it works great, right? And then we have health monitoring of your VM and all the nodes. And automatic recovery, right? A lot of times, if you have disk failures, it used to be in 2003, you had signature issues, disk signature problems. You had to go back and fix that issue. It wasn't really a nice problem, right? It was very sticky. Now, with automatic recovery, if you actually bring back the same disk or the disk that is going to be the same, go to the same place, Failover Cluster Manager will detect that and it will assign it back to the same storage, right? So we have automatic recovery on that too. Now, this is what I love about Failover Cluster 2008 R2 is, and 2008 at the same time. This is Validation Wizard, right? Validation Wizard is, again, one of the things that I always use for health check. So if I'm doing a health check on a Hyper-V server that's highly available in like multi-cluster node, I run Validation Wizard. BPA, Hyper-V BPA Validation Wizard is always out there, right? So I run that because you get reports from all the nodes. If there's any mismatch between drivers, hotfixes, patches, everything else that's going to get reported. You have issues with networking, that will get reported. You have issues with storage, that gets reported. So you get all that from that report. You get a really nice HTML report, right? You can always run it afterwards. So before you create a cluster, you have to run it, right? You won't be able to create a cluster without running this. Because example is, if your storage is not SCSI-3 persistent reservation compatible, it won't let you create a cluster because that's a requirement, right? You get a red error, you have to fix that. Most of the time, it's like either your SAN's old or you don't have the setting enabled on the SAN side. As soon as you enable on the controller, everything works fine, right? But if you have your cluster up and running, you can go back and just do validate this cluster. You run validation against your existing cluster and get a report and see what happens. Maybe somebody just added a new disk or somebody made some changes to your networking and that's why it's causing a problem, right? That's why your cluster node is not coming online. So I would definitely go and run that as part of best practices. Going back to scripting this, yes, you can script that too, right? So the question is, how do we do that? Anyone knows?
Anyone?
Anyone?
PowerShell.
PowerShell again. And that would be a very easy PowerShell command when you have the cluster module failover cluster is loaded, and that is test that cluster. So let me just get the help. Again, get help is always helpful for cluster. Oh, wrong box.
This is the problem with virtual machines. You RDP within RDP within RDP within RDP. Eventually, you don't know
which
where
RDP
are
you're
you.
in. Oh, I did have it up here.
This is terminal
so
server in depth.
So here we go. I already had it opening here. So test cluster. This is running validation wizard from the command line, from the PowerShell, right? So again, if you are scripting all those steps, you can script this too. Create a PowerShell, run test cluster, and capture the report. And reports is always the same place under cluster logs. Or if you really want to see it from the UI, you go back to your failover cluster manager, right? And the option in here is view validation report. As you can see, you can do validation, or you can do view validation report. And that would show you existing validation report. If you already run it and you just want to see it, that's the easiest way.
Now, if they have a SAN that's not capable, right?
Here's the report again. Everything in here, as long as I don't see anything red, I'm fine. If there's anything that I want to see what's going on with these items, again, easy. It's our hyperlink. It takes you all the way down to the problems. There are one of the things that happens in here is because I've already allocated assigned all my storage to resources. If I run validation, it doesn't do the storage test because there's no storage available to do all the arbitration and failover and all that. So it says, hey, we didn't have a storage. as part of the best practices, I always tell people to keep one little small LUN available to the cluster. So when you're running validation, that is being used for testing. So it fails over that LUN between different nodes, and it does the multiple arbitration and single arbitration, and it will get you the report for storage. If you don't do that, you get this error afterwards because there was no storage available for running.
So my question was, if I do have a legacy SAN that for some reason I can't do clustering within Windows Server, what are my options? And do I have free options on the table? And I believe we do, right? iSCSI Target DLC is released version 3.0.
Yeah.
If you're not familiar with that, it's a free iSCSI Target software solution.
Anyone knows about this?
Yeah, anyone? Anyone using it?
See, Microsoft just released our Microsoft iSCSI Target software. It used to be shipped with OEM, and you had to go through OEM and get the storage server to get the iSCSI Target. Now it's free. You can download it, install your R2 box, and use iSCSI Target. We use it all the time. If you look up my blog, actually, I have a step-by-step blog how to actually create highly available virtual machines or clustering VMs. So it would be like guest clustering. If you want to cluster your VMs using iSCSI Target, well, iSCSI Target is free. Use the same thing. Go step by step, and
Absolutely.
You can create a cluster within your VMs. Right?
It's available today. It's probably 5 minutes to install this on any Windows server that you have that's 2008, and invoke this and turn that server right into a SAN. So if you do have SANs that are out of compliance, or that you have specific Hyper-V farms you want to enable in work groups or branches, but you don't want to spend for a SAN, this is one way you can do it.
So these are the items that Cluster Validation Wizard does. It looks at all the storage configuration, shared storage, your shared storage, make sure your shared storage is visible by all the nodes. We look at a cluster network configuration. We look at the inventory and all the hardware, software update settings and driver settings of all the nodes. So you want to make sure you have everything up to date. One of the things I've seen, or we've seen in the field a lot with cluster or Hyper-V cluster issues, is running on older drivers. You know, your HPA driver, make sure you're running on the latest one. And all the nodes, they have the latest update, right? Running Cluster Validation Wizard will tell you that, hey, you know, you have 10 nodes, but 2 of those nodes, they don't have the same driver. They're running older driver. So this is the easiest way. It used to be like years back when we were running 2003, there was this tool called syscompare that would run and tells you what's the difference between different systems. Now this does a similar thing, right? So it shows you, hey, you don't have one of the nodes patched or drivers or anything like that. So this is, again, this is a great tool used for best practices and checking your health of your highly available environment, Hyper-V HA, right? So, and then it checks AD settings, DNS settings, and quorum dependencies and everything else within your environment. Well, this is not really a Cluster 101 class, and the thing is, like, most of you guys are running CSV, so you already got that, right? So I'm not going to go really deep into these matters, but one of the things that you have to be careful is part of best practices. All the nodes within your cluster, make sure they run, first of all, the same manufacturer as far as processor, right? But try to stay the same processor, right? That way, you don't have to worry about any compatibility, live migration, and all those. Because if you don't have that and try to live migrate your virtual machine from one node to the other node that doesn't have a processor with the same feature sets, your live migration will fail. So you definitely want to make sure if you don't have that. A lot of time, you know, people will start a cluster and then drop another server to the cluster, join a new cluster node, right? If you do that, obviously, you might have incompatible or different processors, right? Within the VM, very simple setting within the virtual machine that you can go and, like if I'm in the virtual machine settings, just each virtual machine settings, look at the processor and check the checkbox for this compatibility option of your virtual processor on the VM. And then you'll be all set. You could migrate your VM to the other node with no issues. Okay? What's that?
Are there penalties?
Well, the penalty is you're going to go to the least common denominator of the feature sets of your processor. So if you're using any feature sets on the newer processor, that would go down. So you lose that, right? But usually performance-wise, it's not that bad, so you don't get hit that bad, right?
Yeah, there won't be a degradation on the transfer,
Yeah.
but things like, if your processor's taking advantage of SLAT or other things like that, then and you're coming from a proc that maybe didn't, then some of those advances may not be there. But the Enlightens really don't task that by default, so you would have to be running a workload that's invoking against some of those new features. And there aren't many, so I think you'd be good in most cases.
Yeah, so virtual switches on all the nodes, you want to make sure the virtual switches that's being used by the VMs are exactly named the same, because if you don't have it, when we fail over to the other node, we're not going to just assume that that virtual switch is exactly this one or is the same. We will disconnect it, right? So a Hyper-V cluster, a Hyper-V and failover cluster will disconnect the VM. So you want to make sure this is one of the best practices. Virtual switches all named the same exactly, even if you have case sensitive, on one of the virtual switch names, make sure everyone's the same, right? All the virtual switches and all the nodes. If you have ISO attached to VMs, you want to live migrate the VM, you want to make sure you detach the ISO, because we're not going to find the ISO on the other node after live migration, right? So you want to make sure ISO is detached. In my own lab, one of the things that I do, again, I use SCVMM, right? PowerShell. So I use PowerShell within SCVMM. I go query all the ISOs attached to all the VMs. And then you can just, again, use SCVMM PowerShell to detach them if you want to, right? So it's very simple. Just get virtual, get virtual network or virtual DVD drive, and it shows you all the ISOs that are attached, and you can simply detach them. So you could run that if you're concerned. Or just want to get a report and see what ISOs are attached, right? Or if you have a live migration fails, this is one of the things that you check to see if there's an ISO attached to the VM. All right? So this is not a concern anymore, but sometimes if you make changes outside our preference method of managing VMs is SCVMM, right? That's the best way to do that. But if you go outside that, if you're managing with SCVMM, you go outside that and you make changes within Hyper-V Management Console, sometimes, because it takes a little while, like a few minutes, for Cluster Manager to keep up with those changes with the Hyper-V settings, you need to go ahead and manually refresh VM within the Cluster Manager, right? But again, if you do this within SCVMM, SCVMM will take care of all that behind the scene. You don't need to worry about that. One of the other thing is, as part of best practices, we always want to make sure that you have a network assigned to live migration, okay? So if you go look at your VM and look at the properties of your VM, we have this option called network for live migration. So here's what we have. We have 3 networks exposed. So these are 3 NICs exposed to the cluster, right? So we have 3 network adapters exposed to the failover cluster. And one of the things that we did, we want to make sure the live migration traffic that is SMB traffic, it doesn't go over public network, right? Because imagine you have a 4 gig, we have a VM with 4 gig RAM attached to it, right? So you don't want that 4 gig RAM go over SMB over your public network. So this one will prevent it. So we have the first option. That's a live migration network, right? So that would be our first preference. We could have changed that. Like if you want to change the order, it's easy to change that. And then the second option would be the private network, right? This is how you do it. And then this is global setting. As soon as you change it for one VM, it will get changed for all the VMs on that cluster, right? So change it on one. Again, here's the question: how do we do that with cluster? Again, or with PowerShell? You could do this with PowerShell. So you can just simply, I believe I ran this one. Going back to the PowerShell, here you go. So the easy part is, well, you have a resource, you have a cluster resource called virtual machine, right? That's a resource type. So a resource type is virtual machine. So we want to get the virtual machine resource type, and then here's the output, right? So we have the resource type down here. That's virtual machine. And one of the things that you would see is, what IDs we have in here, is alive, look alive, and all those settings, right? So you can look at all the settings for the virtual machine type, and you can see what network IDs are attached in here. So all the network IDs that are attached to that cluster show up in here. Okay, so if you have more than that, these are all showing up, and you can use, again, PowerShell to query and aggregate the data and see if
just for those networked ID'd under that specific network. So if
Yeah.
I wanted to run a PowerShell script and I just want to find all the systems that are sitting in that private pool, then you can use PowerShell to just go out and send that command, and it'll automatically go out and inventory those VMs that are active.
Yeah, and here are the IDs. So if you run get-cluster network, and we do format list everything, so it just shows in the list view. Here's the ID for this first network. That's the cluster, and that's the network, and all that. So that's the name and IP, and the second one. So the IDs are being captured right here. So you can use these and go ahead and see what's going on with all the other clusters or networks. Okay, so
now, an instance of time, we know that you guys have places to go, and of course, beer's coming up, and drinks, and happy hour or post-happy hour. So we're cognizant of that. We want to switch over to Q&A. If you have real questions that you want to ask on the mic, feel free to get on the mic real quick and give us some questions we can answer. If not, come and hit us up afterwards if you've got a few minutes, or feel free to email both Mark and I. And our information's all available on the deck. And also, just a plug for other sessions.